On tonight's program. No, wait, hang on. Sorry, wrong intro. Hey y'all, Boogie Night here. How's it going? We all have those favorite movies of ours that we enjoy watching on the regular. But separate from that pack are maybe those one or two movies that never get old, that never lose their charm no matter how many times we've watched them. Now, I want you to think if there are any of those movies in your wheelhouse, and if so, why do they never get old? What exactly is the catalyst that separates that one wolf from the rest of the pack, that makes it that alpha? Is it the plot? Is it the characters? Is it the atmosphere? Is it the special effects? If it's a comedy movie, is it the humor? What exactly differentiates that from everything else, particularly if it's a favorite of yours? Well, there's a myriad of reasons why this particular movie is on that separate list from the rest of it. And I'm going to try and go into it as much as I can. And I wasn't originally planning on recording a review of this movie, but with the passing of the late, great Burt Reynolds, I feel it's necessary to go back to the well and describe his probably most widely talked about and acclaimed flick to date. And that movie, of course, is Smokey and the Bandit. Now, Smokey and the Bandit was a 1977 action comedy movie directed by Hal Needham, and not only starred Burt Reynolds as an amazing actor, but had quite the all-star cast of characters as well. From Sally Field to Jackie Gleason to Jerry Reed, just to name a few. In fact, for an Easter egg, Jerry Reed also sang the song Eastbound and Down, which for all intents and purposes was the unofficial anthem to this movie, as it could be heard throughout the course of the entire thing. Now, this was not just a widely acclaimed movie because of just how it set the bar, but I mean also about how much of an inspiration it was to other comedy movies and TV shows, as well to society as a whole. And for me personally, this movie just kind of broke the mold on comedy in general. Now, I know what you're thinking right now, Boogie Night, you hate comedy movies. Why are you tackling another one? Well, first of all, I don't hate comedy movies as a whole. I strongly dislike modern comedy movies because of how they're so cookie-cutter-ish, how the humor is completely lost, and they consist of just dick and fart jokes, sex jokes, grown men screaming like prepubescent children. It doesn't do it for me. If that is in your wheelhouse, well, I'm not going to hold it against you, but don't expect me to sit down and watch it with you no matter what kind of alcohol you provide. I mean, over time, I've seen kind of a digression from the really kind of classical comedy movies to just the way things have gone on today. And this movie in particular, Smokey and the Bandit, is nothing more than a good old-fashioned shenanigans movie. And I feel like that's definitely lacking in today for modern cinema in general. Now, of course, spoilers will be at the end of this when I talk about the plot synopsis, but of course, there'll be little points dotted in and out throughout the course of this review, but I'll try and keep the spoilers to a minimum. Because I strongly encourage y'all, if you haven't seen it, what are you waiting for? Stop watching this review. Go check it out. It's on Amazon Prime. I'm sure it's on YouTube, or better yet, just go ahead and rent or buy the damn thing. It's amazing. I mean, it's only 90 minutes long. I strongly recommend it no matter what kind of person you are. I guarantee by the end of it you will be smiling or maybe even laughing at some of this humor that goes on throughout that. Now, before I get into the reasons why I like this movie, I want to talk about a little bit just about the inspiration that it's had overall. And I'm not just talking about cinema, I'm talking about just society in general. But first of all, let's talk a little bit about three major things that were probably highly, highly inspired by Smokey and the Bandit, at least in my opinion. The first one, probably the most noticeable, was the TV show Dukes of Hazzard, with the redneck humor, with the cars, with outrunning the law, that kind of thing. I mean, and I wasn't a huge fan of Dukes of Hazzard, and I definitely did not like the movie adaptation of that movie, thank you very much. But you've got to respect the TV series for kind of trying to adapt from Smokey and the Bandit and kind of put their own spin on that. So that's one major influence that I've noticed. The second one, and probably less commonly known, was the very brief TV series, The Gemini Man, which was mostly vehicular related, and it later gave rise to a very confusing two-part movie called Riding with Death. And no, I'm not talking about the Matthew Broderick story, alright? Yes, I went there. third, and I'm kind of grasping at straws at this, but once again, going into the vehicular humor and the vehicular shenanigans, which you'll hear about later on during the course of this review, is the Blues Brothers. I mean, I see so many similarities and commonalities between the two, just with the antics of Jake and Elwood, and of course, the Bandit and his sidekick Snowman. So those are just three major influences, but I also want to talk about the impact it had on society. The car that the Bandit drove was a 1977 Pontiac Trans Am, and it became extremely popular to the fact that sales really almost doubled within a short period of time after the movie was released, to the point it overtook the Chevy Camaro equivalent to the Trans Am. And rumor had it that the president of Pontiac actually would give a Trans Am to actor Burt Reynolds. I forget, I think it was like once every year or once every other year or something like that, because of how popular it made it. And secondly, there's also a historical reference to this. But once again, not going into the plot, the big point was that Coors beer cannot be sold east of Texas, and the Bandit had to get the beer from Texas, Texarkana to be specific, to Atlanta. That there is truth behind that, because you could not sell Coors east of Oklahoma, from which that was considered illegal bootlegging. But what made it more interesting was that Coors back then had a total lack of preservatives, so there was a timestamp on it. In fact, there is recorded historical evidence that President Eisenhower stuffed his suitcase full of Coors when he tried to travel from Colorado to Washington, D.C., so go modern politics. So I found that very interesting, that Hal Needham did a little bit of digging and did a little bit of research to find out, how believable, using that term very loosely, can I make this movie. So with that out of the way, I want to talk about two big things that make this movie very good for me. The first one is the cast of characters. And before you think about, okay, they were very believable, whatnot. No. Completely the opposite. They were not only completely static and there was zero growth between them, but every character was completely self-interested, had no regard for anybody around them. And I'll go into a little bit of details during the shenanigans part, but I want to talk about the big four: Burt Reynolds, Sally Field, Jackie Gleason, and Jerry Reed. Of course, you had Burt Reynolds as the main character, Bo Darville, aka the Bandit. The whole premise of this movie was accepting an $80,000 bet from two characters, Big and Little Eno Burdette, that he couldn't get a 400 cases of Coors from Texarkana, Texas to Atlanta, Georgia. Now, I forget the mileage, but this was an $80,000 bet, and I ran the calculations, and if you're looking at that from 1977 conversion to 2018, it was $330,000 plus. So, Bandit, once again, took the bet because his ego was at stake, because they're like, I bet you couldn't do it in 28 hours for 80 grand. So, he enlists the help of the Snowman, I forget his name, and out of the gate, he didn't want to do it with the Bandit. And in fact, the Snowman's wife disliked the Bandit immensely. They were like, what are you going to do? I don't want to do this with you. You're an ass. There's no point for us to be hanging out with each other. Until Bandit told Snowman, this is for an $80,000 bet that we can do this. It's never been done before. And that's what perks up the Snowman to do this. It was not because out of his loyalty to the Bandit or anything like that, but because he's like, I'll split the 80 grand with you. And that's the only reason he's doing it. Even at risk of being divorced from his wife, he's like, well, I've got money on the brain. What more can you ask for? So you have those two characters doing their thing, and then enter Sally Field's character, Carrie, aka the Frog, which I'll get into once again later on, who has ditched her own wedding and flags down the Bandit during the course of this. Doesn't say why she's leaving the wedding, doesn't say why she's in a wedding dress. She's just like, I gotta get away. Doesn't go into details, doesn't ask questions, so she has one purpose on her brain. And while, yes, there is kind of a budding romance that takes off during the course of this movie, it can be argued it's only because of their own selfish nature that she's trying to get away from her wedding. She doesn't care where she really goes, And the Bandit has one goal on his mind, to get that beer and get that money. So it can kind of be like, well, we're in this together. What more can he ask for? If you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. And then you have the antagonist of this movie, Jackie Gleason, as Sheriff Buford T. Justice, and he's without question the biggest sociopath throughout any kind of comedy movie, from classic to modern day comedy. He, for all intents and purposes, is kind of a Machiavellian nature, that the ends justify the means and get to the goal no matter what it is, no matter what it takes. You've got to do this to achieve it. And you see through it, he's running down cars, he's harassing other police officers, he's beating up civilians, he's screaming and swearing into the mic. And let me also preface this with the fact that he is a Texas sheriff, and he's going across state lines from Texas to Oklahoma to Arkansas to Alabama to Georgia, which, if he's in pursuit of that, you would leave that up to the local law enforcement. You would leave that to the state troopers and the sheriffs of that state and the county. But when the other people are saying, like, you know, you can't do this, you're Texas, this is under our jurisdiction, he's screaming, he's flailing. I mean, there are parts throughout the movie when he's yelling at his own son. And the reason behind that was that Carrie, aka Frog, was supposed to marry Buford's son, Junior. And so the whole thing becomes a cat and mouse game, but I don't even think that Buford Justice doesn't even know what he's gonna do once he captures Bandit and Frog. I mean, he's saying, like, I'm gonna string you up, I'm gonna find a tree and hang you, blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's a sign of rage to the point it's kind of like the man is questioning his, about letting her get away. So there is no reason for these characters to have any kind of development, but that adds to the overall comedy factor of this movie. But once again, that's my own opinion of that. So with that in mind, the big thing about this, the second big thing, that before I talk about the plot, is the humor and shenanigans behind this. It's what made the movie so funny as it was. Now, yes, of course, there is a little bit of lowbrow humor throughout the course of it. I mean, it's to be expected. It's a comedy movie, and it's a redneck comedy movie. I mean, it takes place in the southern United States. I mean, so of course you're going to see Burt Reynolds and Jerry Reed, the popular country singer, act kind of rednecky. I mean, there's one line when they break in to the Coors distribution plant in Texarkana that I think it was Snowman. He goes, "Whew, redneck heaven." And you kind of have that joking humor back and forth, but it's a very dry bit. I mean, there's another line when he names Carrie Frog. She's like, "Why are you calling me a frog?" He goes, "Well, you're hopping around like a frog, and you're kind of cute like a frog, and I want to jump you." And later on, during one of the scenes, actually, I'll get into that in a minute. And there's certain lines, and when they're going back and forth between Sheriff Justice and the Bandit, and after getting threatened to get killed, the Bandit's line back to the sheriff were, "Sheriff, do you know what FO means?" Think about that for 2 seconds. You should get it. And it's just these little exchanges between the characters, such as Bandit getting on the radio to Snowman with Frog riding shotgun. He's like, "Well, we got a choke and puke coming up. We're going to pull on over, get some eats." And Frog's like, "A choke and puke?" Well, it's a side-of-the-road restaurant. But humor aside, we want to talk about just the vehicular shenanigans and antics that go on into it. I mean, this goes back into the characters having complete disregard for the world around them. And it's, while not believable to say the least, it's still hilarious that there's a scene where Frog and Bandit are trying to outrun some state troopers, and they're going down a dirt road, probably one lane for all intents and purposes, and the bridge is out. So the Bandit basically does a ramp jump across to the other side, which of course is definitely not believable. And then of course the other state troopers and sheriffs crash into each other, fall into the river and whatnot. And Frog makes the joke like, "I want to jump a house, I want to jump something else." And of course the Bandit's like, "Jump me." And there's other scenes where they're knocking over mailboxes, where cops are chasing after them and misjudging jumps or ramps or anything like that. And there's one scene where Snowman gets pulled over by a cop on a motorcycle, or a Snowman calls it an Evil Knievel, and the Bandit does a U-turn, drives back over, pulls next to the state trooper, where Frog just kind of whistles to him, and then promptly gives him the finger before they drive off. So, of course, something you would never see happening in real life. And, of course, the cop takes off after them, so they're chasing around, and the cop on the motorcycle misjudges a jump and lands smack into a puddle of water on the side of the road. To which another state trooper makes some comment being like, you shouldn't be driving like that. I know. I mean, I'm not doing it justice. I'm really not. But just think about cars crashing into each other just out of sheer randomness, because the characters just couldn't care less. They're just so focused on the prize that just accidents keep happening behind them. But I think the biggest thing that makes this so hilarious, besides all the antics and whatnot, besides the Blues Brothers kind of... I'm saying Blues Brothers, but I mean, it's really that Blues Brothers, once again, is why I think was very inspired by this movie. Because you don't see just random crashes happening all over the place with each other. But anyway, so I'm getting ahead of myself. One of the biggest just things that I found hilarious about this in the humor and the shenanigans section is how every other person is coming out of the woodwork to support the Bandit on his goal. Like, he's got this cult following of every which way, and I'm not just talking truckers. I mean, there are truckers that will radio him on their CB to alert them of what's going on, saying like, okay, one guy, I think he went under the handle, Silver Tongue Devil. He's like, just to let you know, Bandit, there's a roadblock by a bunch of Smokies up ahead. You might want to avoid it. And then the camera pans out, and Silver Tongue Devil's actually getting a ticket by the police while this is happening. So he actually is reporting what's going on. There's another scene when they cross into Alabama, and there's a line of trucks, of 18-wheelers and flatbeds is cruising, and they're in hot pursuit by another cop. And Bandit gets on the radio and he's like, hey, can we slide on in there for a little hide and seek? And then another one of the truckers, he's like, yeah, come on in. So they squeeze in between a line of the trucks, and another 18-wheeler pulls out, cuts the cop off, and drives ahead to basically conceal the Bandit and Frog's Trans Am, while the other state trooper is forced to drive on the side of the road and ahead of them. So this little hide and seek game, once again, something you would not find out. But not even just truckers being like, hey, this is Little Beaver trying to, just want to say, put your pedal to the metal and drive on, buddy. You have civilians coming out of the woodwork to support them and their goal. And to give you two big examples, one was a lady who called herself the Good Witch of the North, who was alerting the Bandit of a roadblock throughout later on to reschedule or kind of do a detour around that, to which Bandit, of course, radios that back to Snowman saying, do you use this detour okay? Yeah, let's go. But then it pans out, and the Good Witch of the North was the one that caused the accident by not putting her turn signal on and basically wasting another flatbed truck. There's another incident when Sheriff Justice is trying to get information from a local tow guy, and this random tow truck goes flying by and smashes the driver's side door off of Sheriff Justice's own car, laughing like a maniac. And the final example I want to give about this is a lady calling herself Foxy Lady. Yes, of course, we're probably thinking of the song Foxy Lady. Basically, for all intents and purposes, runs a house of ill repute out of her RV, and with a couple other ladies, and was entertaining a police captain. But she basically gets on this radio to warn the Bandit about this particular thing going on, saying like, hey, there's a bunch of Smokies out here. She's like, don't worry, we'll entertain them. Why don't you come by? We're at mile marker 86. And the Bandit kind of picks up on this because they all know Sheriff Justice is listening in. He's like, all right, I'll be right there. So Sheriff Justice takes a turn around and drives off to that mile marker, arrests what he thinks is the Bandit till a local Smokey says, no, that's our captain. I mean, just once again, the overall concept of just jokes and everything flying every which way. You can't go more than just a couple minutes without at least smirking a little bit, if not snickering like an idiot, which I did. And as I've said, I've seen this movie a handful of times, and every time I watch it, I think like, oh yeah, I remember that part. So those are just the big two things. I know I talk about the cinematography or the special effects, but there were none in this movie. It's just a good old-fashioned high-speed pursuit, kind of in, once again, I can't compare it to anything because it set the bar. The only thing that I can think about remotely would be, this could be something I could have seen Paul Newman in without the humor and being just more of a straight crime noir thing. But with that being said, let's talk about the plot in a nutshell. So, of course, spoiler alert. So, as I've said, but I talked about the historical significance, was you could not get cores on the East Coast, east of Texas. Well, in actuality, Oklahoma, but in the movie they kept saying Texas. So truckers would try on numerous occasions to bootleg cores from Texas and Oklahoma and the western states to get to the East Coast, to try and sell it off or bootleg it or anything like that, only to get stopped by the police, the Smokies, hence the name of the title. So Big and Little Enos Burdett, basically I don't really know what they were except the father and son, millionaires to some degree, I guess, want to make a bet that they could not get 400 cases of cores from Texarkana, Texas to Atlanta. They were betting against each other, saying the only person that could do it was Bo Darville, aka the Bandit. So they approached the Bandit at basically some sort of redneck carnival race thing and basically questioned his manhood to be like, okay, you can't do it. You're not the Bandit we've heard of. You don't have the legend behind you as being this, trucker extraordinaire. But we'll give you $80,000 if you can do it within 28 hours. And so that kind of perks him up. He's like, 80,000? Okay, well, I need to buy a truck and I need to buy a fast car. So they basically give him an advance of the money so he can buy a Peterbilt truck and the 1977 Pontiac Trans Am. So he drives the truck over to enlist the help of Snowman, as I've said earlier, and only convinces him to do it with him because of splitting the winnings with him. So basically what's going to happen is that the Snowman will drive the truck, and the Bandit will drive the Trans Am and be the blocker, meaning he will be the person to interfere with the Smokies or any kind of obstacles that come their way. He'll drive ahead and say like, okay, Snowman, just so you know, good buddy, we are going to be doing this instead of this, and blah, 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 and so on and so forth. And they come up with a way to try and keep the Smokies off their back by giving fake radio information. So it's like, well, by doing the odd CB channel. So like, okay, up on 20, all right, 10-4, buddy. They'll go to channel 19 to kind of throw them off to do the real conversations. Or up on 18, they go to 17, and so on and so forth. And it kind of becomes an ingenious method. So there are some shenanigans with them driving over to Texarkana, Texas to pick up the 400 cases. And they break into the distribution, and Bandit, not knowing how to drive a forklift, somehow manages to get most of the cases of beer into the truck, and off they go. Things go okay for the most part. There's some Smokey interference, but the Bandit manages to throw them off, like I said. And then enter the Frog, standing in the middle of the road in a snow-white wedding dress, flagging them down. So she jumps in the car, and off they go again, and that is when you find out about Sheriff Buford T. Justice and his dim-witted son, Junior, who Frog was supposed to be married. And he basically, once again, as I said in the cast of characters, takes it upon himself to find Frog and basically wring her neck, still not knowing about the Bandit. And of course the Snowman picks up on this, and he sees Frog in trying to change out of her wedding dress, and he's of course being like, calling him a lucky devil and whatnot. So this is kind of when things would split off just a little bit, with the Bandit trying to run block and at the same time outrunning local Smokies and state trooper Smokies, and the incredibly irate and getting more and more pissed off to the point you think his brain's going to explode, Sheriff Justice. And the Bandit and the Snowman still doing his thing, of course, with his trusty basset hound, Fred, which almost becomes comic relief in his own mind, because during the course of the movie, Snowman continues to talk to Fred, being like, "Oh, you're looking a little thin, your skin, boy," even though this hound is massive. I mean, this basset is about as wide as it is tall, so that's just, it's like a sausage with feet. So throughout the course of the movie, with the ducking and the dodging, and shenanigans ensuing, I mean, once again, there's even a scene where the Snowman loses a fight with a bunch of bikers, so when he gets back into the truck and drives off, he runs over their motorcycles. So I can't do the plot too much justice, because, I mean, it's once again a lot of split lines between Frog telling her story to the Bandit, and the Bandit wondering why he's being in hot pursuit by Sheriff Justice, and Frog not really fessing up until probably 2/3 of the way in, but he still accepts her for the fact that, okay, we're still in this together, we're stuck together, we have one purpose in mind. I mean, so they manage to cross into Alabama and then get to Georgia with 10 minutes to spare and get the beer over to the Burdettes. And they're like, "Give us the money. And we also need a car to get out of here, because our car has obviously been picked up by, Sheriff Psychopath and his idiot son." So Big Burdette gives him the keys to his caddy, complete with steer horns on the hood and Mr. Big as the license plate, only for little Enos to say, "You know what, how about double or nothing?" To which, of course, the Bandit can't turn down a bet at this point. He's like, "What do you mean double or nothing?" And little Enos goes, "We want clam chowder, 18 hours to and from Boston," which I calculated, it's 16 hours from Atlanta to Boston to begin with, but the Bandit's like, "I'll do it." Frog's like, "I'll do it." Snowman's like, "Are you crazy? I'm crazy. I'm divorced. Let's do it." So they get in the caddy and speed off, passing Sheriff Justice, which up until this point, Justice does not know what the Bandit looks like. This has all been going on via CB radio and saying, just talking to each other. And the Bandit, they basically have a conversation with each other, kind of grudgingly accepting that, respecting each other, being like, "Well, I've been chased by the best, and you bird dogged me the entire time." To which Justice is like, "Well, you have been a fantastic fugitive. Where the hell are you?" To which, long story short, the Bandit's like, "Look over your shoulder." And then Justice looks over and sees them, and the Bandit basically challenges them at the end, being like, "Hey, we're going up to Boston, come follow us." To which Justice takes off after them. So it's a comedic end to the movie. It's overall, I mean, once again, I can't do this movie justice. You have to see it for yourself. But if you like comedy movies of the classic variety, like Blues Brothers, like I said, this is the movie for you. Even if you like modern comedy movies, I would suggest to go back to this, because it is such a well-done flick, and it's so silly, and it sets a precedent to what comedy movies are all about, or what they should be. So from the characters and like their interactions with each other and their complete, just utter, borderline sociopathy, to the jokiness, to the humor, to the shenanigans, to the vehicular insanity, it really is done well. So I applaud Hal Needham for directing such a fantastic movie, and applaud the cast of characters. And of course, I give homage to the late Burt Reynolds. May he ride on up there. But once again, that's just my opinion. I would love to hear your opinion on this. If you've seen the movie before, what did you think of it? What did you like most about it? What didn't you like about it? Let me know in the comments below. So with that being said, before I call it a day, if you like the Sonic Boogie project and you want to find out more about what I do have a Twitter page as well as a public Discord channel, and links to both of those are in the description below, as well as a link to my Twitch page. And if you have some money you really just want to get rid of and not donate to a charity or something proper, my Patreon account. So otherwise, with that being said, you all have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you on the flip side, alright? Peace.